Hello, everyone. Excited to be here. Great building, right? I mean, I keep expecting these parts of the wall here to move on me, but it's very cool setup. So today, as was mentioned, I'm going to be talking a little bit about human potential. And for as long as I can remember, I've been making the case for my own potential. I've been sort of trying to explain that I'm more than meets the eye, or that there's more to me than the bulleted biography list. I think many of us have been there, right? Whether it's a job you're applying for, or a promotion you're trying to get, or a team you're trying to make, it's pretty common to want to kind of make a case for your potential. So when we think about the word potential, it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but I think it's important to kind of touch base on sort of what the word means. So if we were to kind of parse this word out. So potential is defined as latent qualities or kind of hidden variables, hidden characteristics that if developed, or if sort of like put to flight, if you will lead to great future success, right? So taking these different pieces kind of one at a time, we think about latent qualities, right? So again, kind of like hidden superpowers, right? I think of like Marvel movies, and the hero has these like great attributes, but you don't actually get to see this person do great things until like their superpower is unleashed because they were bitten by a spider or something, right? And so, and I almost tripped. I said I wasn't going to trip, but I almost tripped. And then when we think about the development side, right, this relates to opportunity, right? So when it comes to the world of work or to human potential, having something developed that's a latent characteristic or a latent variable is really kind of connected to something sort of being a catalyst, right? Something acting upon it. And then there's this idea of prediction, right? Predicting the future utility or the future use. So many of you are probably familiar with this graphic here. It's the law of diffusion of innovation. Now, typically, we talk about this law as it relates to technology and consumer technology products. In this context, I want to change that. I don't know that this is approved, but I've decided that this actually makes sense for hiring managers. And when we look at the way that people hire, that typically hiring managers also fall somewhere on this spectrum, which would make sense, right? I mean, human beings do human things, and they act in human ways, and this is essentially meant to represent that. So at the sort of far tail here, or the close tail, we've got innovators and early adopters. So this is about 15.5% of the population. These are, on the technology side, these are the people that, back in 2007, 2008, camped outside and lined up around the block to get iPhones, right? Long before many of us did. And that's the innovator crowd. That's 2.5%, very small population, 2.5% of the population. And then the early adopters are the ones that are kind of like friends with that crazy innovator, right? And they kind of see what they're doing. They kind of make sure that it doesn't blow up. And if it's cool, then they get it too. But they're part of that first group. But it takes somebody else moving first for them to take some action. So I said at the outset, think of this, as it relates to hiring managers. When we think about early career or entry level or people from different backgrounds or experiences, and we think about the law of diffusion of innovation, we are looking at basically 15.5%, if we're being generous, right? 15.5%, if we're being generous, of hiring managers are likely to bet on somebody who doesn't have a proven track record of experience, a proven track record of doing a certain thing. And again, this is important when we're thinking about potential, right? Because these are hidden or latent variables, right? Hidden characteristics. So we all know that to achieve our potential, we need to have opportunity. But that opportunity is going to be greatly diffused here based on who we get a chance to talk to. Compounding that, we look at the world of job applications, right? And if any of you, which I'm sure all of you have, applied to a job in the past, it can be a stressful, painstaking process. And a recent study was done that found that early career people, entry-level people, typically apply to 18 jobs before getting one interview. Now, interview in this context, I think, is again being a little bit generous, because this could also mean a pre-screen, which is like I get a phone call and like, Have you done this? Yes. Have you done this? Yes. Have you done this? No. Okay, goodbye, right? Like it's kind of nonsense. So we think about 18 to 1. So any guesses at how many applications are typically put out into the world before an entry-level candidate gets a job offer? Any guesses? Just shout it out. 60, 50? 2? No, not 2. Not 2, not 2. The answer is 90. 90. So 90 to 1. So we're talking about 90 applications to 1 job offer. And then we look at ourselves and we have stats like that. And then we look at employees or we look at sort of the world of work and we wonder like, why are people not happy in their jobs? Why are employers not happy with the talent that they have? In some ways, it's like people get desperate, right? I mean, 90 job applications is a lot. I know, at the advent of like the easy apply kind of button, people can go and apply to 100 jobs and have no idea what they've just applied for. I mean, it's sort of entertaining. It could be a fun game, actually, if you wanted to try that. But so on one end, we've got a group of hiring managers that are not likely to bet on somebody with no experience. And on the other end, we've got this like abundance of applications being sent out basically into the ether. And so it's like ships passing in the night, right? I mean, the ability to connect and make a meaningful impact is pretty low. And I think the villain in this story is the resume and the job description, and also kind of the world that kind of connects those two pieces. So for a long time, we've been using job descriptions and resumes and building algorithms to try and make these things connect. Now, I'm a data scientist by trade, and so I love algorithms. Don't get me wrong, I'm not like anti-algorithm. But when it comes to these sorts of algorithms, these are very simple, very basic keyword matching algorithms, which are, anyone that knows what they're talking about will tell you, are the worst kind, because they can give you a lot of false positives. They can give you a lot of bad connection points and basically can create something that's a match that is literally just a literal match, based on words. So, how did we get here? First and foremost, we got here because the world works in a way that really kind of the employer side, or the side with the job, right, the demand side, has long had access to so many applicants that they needed to filter them somehow, right? They needed to filter them, they needed to sort of vet through them. And so there was always this kind of urge to take a look at, like, how can we short circuit this? How can we do this better? And so these matching algorithms came to be. But we now live in a day and age where the technology of matching algorithms is archaic based on what we can actually do now. But we're still relying on these things. We're still asking people to put these resumes out into the world. I mean, let's just do a quick show of hands. Who actually thinks, for an entry-level candidate, who actually thinks a resume is a good description of someone's potential? Does anyone think that? Because if you do, come talk to me afterwards. We're going to have some words. But the reality is that, like, we're trying to bet on, let's say, somebody who just wrapped up school at University of Minnesota, or is just re-entering the workforce, or whatever that situation may be. There's a story there, right? There's a story, there's a journey, there's experiences, there's value to that individual, but we don't see any of that because we're delineating, we're kind of distilling them down to, bullet points on a piece of paper. And then we're trying to connect those to job descriptions, which, hey, I've tried to. Job descriptions are really hard to write, right? They are really, really hard to write. Often they end up saying things like self-starter, which I don't know what the opposite of that is, but maybe like doesn't start. But like we think about like what is the spectrum we're looking at there. When you think about some of the technical skills required, one of my favorites is everyone wants you to have some familiarity with like the Microsoft Office suite, let's say, or something like that. And almost all candidates will raise their hand and say, oh, I know how to use Excel, I know how to use PowerPoint. And then you talk to two different candidates. One of them can do macros and run regression analysis in Excel, and the other one uses it to do a shopping list, right? So like there's a massive, massive spectrum when it comes to all of these things. But yet, as a group, we're collectively still doing this. We're still doing it. And it's okay, because I just think we're still doing it because there hasn't been something out there that has really kind of moved us in the direction of doing this in a better way. So My company, Avenica, that's what we're working on. That's what we're working to build. So through a process of first starting with access, right? So we have access to anywhere between 300 and 500 applicants per day nationally. 300 to 500 applicants coming into our platform every single day, raising their hand saying they'd like to work with us. When they come in, they don't just come in and give us a resume and then we look at it and do a thing. We send them through a multitude of steps. We call them levels. Think of it as like a video game. First step of the video game, you kind of enter the scene, then you do the first task, and then the first thing, and then the next thing, and then ultimately you get to go like fight the boss man or something. And so we structure our levels such that people have the opportunity to progress through our system without being filtered out, right? So we don't filter people based on how many years of experience they had, or what their college degree was, or where they worked last, or what they did before. Our process is entirely self-directed. So when you put candidates at the forefront, and you allow them to sort of make their case and go through the process, they start to advance to these levels. Now, these levels aren't IQ tests, because I don't think those are any good. They're not like crazy things demanding people to write essays and do all sorts of stuff. Basically what they are, they're short kind of micro experiences. So one example will be an assessment that we created, which is a preference assessment that we call Halo. You can actually try Halo if you'd like it. Just come visit us at our table. You can go through the assessment yourself. But going through that assessment and completing it, and then taking action on the next level. And the next level may be going to watch a YouTube video about a certain company that's 5 or 6 minutes long, and we're tracking if you're watching this. And then once you're done watching that, coming back and sending someone an email summarizing the salient points, right? So through that process, we can understand, are you following directions? Are you responsive? Are you going to do what you say you're going to do? Can you pay attention? And then can you communicate? Can you write a coherent email and summarize some key points? For most, I'm not saying all, but for the vast majority of entry-level jobs in corporate America, whether it's in claims or customer success or customer service or sales or enter name here, those key kind of attributes are really the sort of pillars of success. Right? Like if you can do those things, you're going to learn how to do all the other stuff. Right? Nobody comes into a job, knowing exactly what to do and how to do everything. Most of those things are learned through the process of exposure and experience. So as we go through these levels, individuals are kind of proving what they can do. Right? They're kind of proving their level of grit, their level of tenacity, and also their level of proficiency. And then ultimately, they're asked to schedule time with us. So what's interesting is we are a career launching platform, but we don't employ any recruiters because we don't do any outreach to candidates telling them, hey, come talk to us, because that is a process that is completely demand oriented. It is looking at a job description and looking for people that it's like the human equivalent to the matching algorithm, right? So we don't do that. So we put people at the forefront and say, hey, you want to talk to somebody about your career, you want to make your case, you want to tell us your story, great. Go through these steps, and if you do that, you get to meet with us. So what the candidate then does is they schedule time to meet with somebody from our talent operations team, and their job, actually Nicole, who's here, she's very pregnant, so hopefully she's still here. Her team does this, and their job is, as we instruct them to stamp the hearts of every person that they interact with, to stamp the hearts of every person they interact with. Their job is not to filter people out or to find reasons to exclude them. Their job is to make an impact. And so through doing that, what they end up doing is they have conversations with candidates where they take the different data points that have come to us. They're analyzing those different bits and pieces of data, and then they're engaging in more something that's more like therapy than it is like interviewing. Right? They're asking like, okay, tell me about a time that you went through something really, really difficult in your life. Like, what's the hardest thing you've ever been through? Like, what's the most challenging thing? Like, what do you do for fun? What would your friends say about you? Like, what is the weirdest thing that you don't tell people about? Like, what's your guilty pleasure, right? Like, through this process of really kind of getting to know someone, we can start to learn really valuable pieces of information. For example, how many resumes would say that I've dealt with food insecurity in my life, right? But how many people would want to bet on a candidate that knows how to, what I like to call the $16 test, which is go to a grocery store and feed a family of 5 for $16. The amount of mental math required to do that and the amount of like calm in the face of adversity, being able to do that, that person's not gonna hide underneath their desk when they get a tough deliverable. That's somebody you want on your team, right? That's somebody who's gonna show up and work hard. That's somebody who's going to make an impact. And so we get to know these individuals and we get to hear their story, and then we get to help them sort of craft that narrative in a way that they may not even be comfortable with yet, right? So, I talked about, potential earlier. Talking about getting comfortable. I'm a poor kid who grew up on the south side of Milwaukee, right? That's my story. Came from a very bad neighborhood, not supportive home life, and at a very young age, I was diagnosed with a neurological disorder called Tourette syndrome. I'm sharing this because I'm personally trying to get better at sharing this part of my story, which I've been afraid to do until just probably like 5 years ago. So we all have stuff, right? But that stuff is what makes us unique. That stuff is what gives us our superpowers. That stuff is what kind of underscores our potential. And it's only through going through a process where a candidate gets to sort of tell their story and be sort of in charge of whether or not they get access to an opportunity, and then listening to them and having a conversation, do we ever actually get to see the full picture? People are so much more than resumes. And so when we do this, some pretty cool shit happens. So, sorry, I wasn't supposed to swear. It's really hard for me. My 7-year-old told me, Dad, don't swear. So over the last few years, we've been able to launch over 2,000 careers. Of those careers that we've launched, we're seeing that candidates stay in these opportunities for 3 times as long. So 3 times as long with these employers. Not in the same job, because a lot of the people that we place end up getting promoted. One such person that comes to my mind is a woman named Gigi Watkins. Gigi Watkins was someone who applied to work at a very large corporation, I think 4 or 5 times on her own. 4 or 5 times, was never even interviewed, didn't even get like the nonsense, like phone screen, 5-question, yes or no, whatever. She was never interviewed. She came to us, we worked with her, we were able to sort of position her, we pitched her to that very same company, and she was hired. A year later, she's running one of their employee resource groups and has been promoted to a lead. It's amazing what happens when we get out of our own way, when we stop relying on all of the barriers that we are typically blinded by. It's bias, right? It's bias, and it doesn't, what makes it worse is it actually doesn't actually predict anything, right? So prior to coming to Avenica, I spent about 6 years at Manpower Group. So Manpower Group, massive human capital organization, global company. I was their first ever data scientist that they hired. And when I was there, one of the landmark things that I did was viewed as a failure, but to me as a data scientist, I actually viewed it as like a pretty cool finding. We partnered with Google and Cognizant, and we did this massive study. And the goal was to figure out what from a resume we could use to predict job performance. And when we realized we couldn't predict anything about job performance from a resume, we then shifted, like, well, let's just predict whether or not they get hired. That didn't work either. So we found that it was a null finding. We accepted the null hypothesis, which is resumes don't predict a damn thing. But today, we engage in this level of kind of collective insanity that relies on these things. So where I'm going with this is that when we get out of the way and when we don't rely on some of these broken tools, we have an opportunity to really start to change the way the world works and really start to unleash human potential. And as you can see from the slide, one of the things that's been a byproduct of that is 62% of our careers launched in 2022 were BIPOC candidates, 62%. And again, we don't have recruiters. So we're not going and like calling, HBCUs and saying, hey, we want to find people. Like, no, it's just when we get out of the way and we let people take charge, we are identifying people that have tremendous stories, that have been through great ordeals, that have overcome so much. It's so powerful that when we turn around and then go tell those stories to our hiring partners, they're like, yeah, let's go. And they're excited, and these people make a huge impact. So ultimately, when it comes down to understanding human potential and what we're trying to do, the key and the solution is fairly simple, right? We need to use the data, the technology that exists today. And we're just getting started. We're looking for different ways every single day to capture new and unique bits of data and information. Things like facial recognition software are going to lead us down the path of being able to do a lot of really cool stuff. But ultimately, the key here is in understanding that we have to be able to tap into the supply and let the supply tell us their story. And in lieu of us going and finding everything out about an individual beforehand, we shouldn't be screening them out based on a resume. We just shouldn't, because we're missing out on the most valuable resource. And I know you all know what that is. It's people, right? The secret behind every great company is great people. And today, too many great people are being missed or are being ignored or are just being flat out rejected because of words on a resume. We can do better. And if you agree with us, we hope you'll come check us out and join us. Thank you.